Good morning. I'm Jeff Adelman, and this is another edition of Questions for Lawyers. I'm lucky enough to have with me today my good friend, Steve Orchard from Boca Raton, who practices in bankruptcy law. Steve, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Good morning, Steve Orchard. I am a bankruptcy attorney. My office is in Boca Raton. I'm a sole practitioner, and I've handled a great variety of bankruptcy cases, big and small, individual and corporate. And I know Jeff has some questions for me today about bankruptcy, what it is and what it entails. So I'm happy to be here and happy to answer some of these common questions that a lot of people are asking.
And we do get a lot of questions, believe it or not, with personal injury. And, people call me about all sorts of different legal issues. But when you get a call about bankruptcy, people usually start out with, I'm in a lot of debt, something bad happened, I can't get out of debt. I'm sure that's the call that you get too. What is your procedure for determining whether somebody should or should not file for bankruptcy?
Well, the situation you just described is pretty much the phone call that I get every time. It's a person who just can't handle their finances any longer. They're getting phone calls, they're getting things in the mail, or worse yet, knocks on the door from somebody who's suing them over a debt that they can't handle. So what I typically do, again, as I mentioned, I'm a sole practitioner, so I handle everything from soup to nuts on every case. I take the initial phone call, I do the initial client consultation, and I'll go through the individual facts and circumstances of each potential client and discuss the pros and cons of bankruptcy, discuss what type of debt they have, what type of assets they have, and make a determination on the best course moving forward.
Is there a certain amount of debt that qualifies a person to file for bankruptcy, or is it depend?
It does depend. There's no hard and fast rules. So there's nothing in the bankruptcy code that says you have to have X amount of dollars of debt to be eligible for bankruptcy. So anybody with $1 worth of debt theoretically can be a candidate for bankruptcy. It's a matter of whether it makes sense or not. And everybody has a different tolerance level for collection efforts. Nobody likes to get a phone call or a knock on the door, but I have some clients who we come to the conclusion that's all that's going to happen, so bankruptcy may not be necessary. And then there are others where we say bankruptcy is the only way to go and the best way to go. But as far as a debt threshold, there really isn't a threshold.
Well, I guess when somebody comes to you, are they automatically going to be getting a bankruptcy from you, or do you offer other services as well?
I do offer other services. There's, I'm what's called a debt relief agency. So I have two responsibilities. One is self-imposed as a practitioner. The other one is mandated, where I actually am required to look at non-bankruptcy related options for every client. And we'll go through that approach and determine whether bankruptcy is the right thing or not. We may end up doing debt settlement and negotiation for the client and keep them out of bankruptcy. And there are sometimes, Jeff, where somebody walks out of my office and I've come to the conclusion that they don't need bankruptcy. They don't need any type of debt relief. They may be uncollectible and they may have that high tolerance level for phone calls and other things where they're not concerned about it. So they may walk out of my door having just gotten information about their circumstances, feeling better about it, and we may not do a bankruptcy or debt negotiation or anything at all.
Okay. I don't know if those are questions coming in from the audience, but let me ask you this. When somebody does declare bankruptcy, does that mean that they don't have to pay any of the debt back?
That's a good question, and I get asked that very often when I'm in a consultation with a client. To some extent, yes, that's exactly what it means. It means that the person who goes through the bankruptcy process and does the right things, fills out the right forms, shows up when they're supposed to show up, they will get this piece of paper at the end of the process called a discharge. And that means that they are not legally obligated to pay the debts that they've properly scheduled and given notice to their creditors on. Just like everything in the law, there are exceptions to that. So although credit card debt and other types of what's called unsecured debt may be forgiven and discharged in a bankruptcy, home loans, automobile loans, student loan debt, domestic support obligations such as child support or marital support, alimony. Those types of things may not be discharged through a bankruptcy.
What about medical debt?
Unfortunately, I know we're not a political conversation here today, so be it as it may, what you think of our climate with the healthcare system, the fact of the matter is a lot of people, unfortunately.
Hold on for 1 second. I figured out what's going on. Hopefully that will take care of the dinging.
No problem. I thought it was just a lot of interest in what we had to say here.
Oh, there's 100 questions. There's 100 questions. You're going to be here for the rest of the day. Steve.
Maybe you're just a popular guy. I don't know. You are.
Please. Thank you, Steve.
So medical debt, unfortunately, I've worked with a lot of clients over the years who they are only in my office or they're only talking to me because they've had some type of a severe illness. And unfortunately, even some people that have medical insurance, I'll keep going.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So even people that have proper medical insurance, unfortunately, if they've suffered some type of severe medical illness, the co-pays that accompany that or denial of claims may lead them to bills that they can never realistically afford to pay. And rather than having their credit impacted for the next 5, 6, 7, up to 10 years, we may do a bankruptcy for them to avoid that circumstance and relieve them of that debt. But yes, unfortunately, medical debt is a prominent reason why people will seek bankruptcy relief.
What do you charge when somebody comes into your office?
Well, the first consultation that I provide is complimentary. So it's my pleasure to provide a service to the community and provide a service to individuals who are going through a tough time and sit and evaluate their circumstances. As you know, somebody may walk in your door. I know that you oftentimes will give free consultations as well. There are some times where we are able to help, and that's great. And then we'll be compensated for our time and expertise moving forward. But if we're unable to help, or if there is a reason why we're not needed, it doesn't make sense to take a fee from a person who's already been through a tough time. So I'll offer a complimentary consultation for anybody who's seeking bankruptcy advice and sort of see where it goes from there.
How long does a bankruptcy usually last if you do have to file for a bankruptcy?
I get asked this question all the time, and it's a good question. And there are different types of bankruptcy that are available. Some bankruptcies, I'll have a client in or out in 3 to 4 months from the day I file the case, which would be a Chapter 7 case under the right circumstances. A Chapter 13 case can last 36 or 60 months, depending on their circumstances. And in less common instances, we may do a Chapter 11 case for an individual, and that varies wildly depending on the circumstances of the case. But, typically either form or whatever course we take through the bankruptcy is going to put somebody onto a better track and give them a fresh start faster than if they do nothing.
I have a question for you relating to my practice with personal injury. We have cases sometimes where a client receives money from a personal injury case. And I've had it where they said, I don't know how I'm going to pay off all this debt. From one reason or another, they accrue debt because they lost a job or something even not related to the personal injury case at all, but they're getting money from a lawsuit or a personal injury claim. And they talk to me about filing for bankruptcy. Is that